Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome back to my channel. Now for those of you who don't know, I'm old. And I remember whenever every couple of years in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, you would get really, really great, and I mean really, really great, Star Wars games. And they were rich in story, in special effects, for the time, mind you. But it was really the choices you got. Now, in particular, one of them was Dark Forces. Later, it became Jedi Knights Dark Forces 2. But you got to choose between being a Jedi and being a Sith. It was kind of like Doom, where it was like a first-person shooter, and then you could use the Force, and it was all this fun stuff. I mean, for me as a Star Wars fan, I geeked out. I probably hyperventilated, had a panic attack, went to Jesus, came back, played the game. Okay? But one of the villains in Dark Forces, or Star Wars Dark Forces, was a guy named General Rom Mock. Now, I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong. It's spelled M-O-H-C. Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to my channel. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm old. And I remember whenever every couple of years in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, you would get really, really great, and I mean really, really great, Star Wars games. And they were rich in story, in special effects, for the time, mind you. But it was really the choices you got. Now, in particular, one of them was Dark Forces. Later, it became Jedi Knights Dark Forces 2. But you got to choose between being a Jedi and being a Sith. It was kind of like Doom, where it was like a first-person shooter, and then you could use the Force, and it was all this fun stuff. I mean, for me as a Star Wars fan, I geeked out. I probably hyperventilated, had a panic attack, went to Jesus, came back, played the game. Okay? But one of the villains in Dark Forces, or Star Wars Dark Forces, was a guy named General Rom Mock. Now, I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong. It's spelled M-O-H-C. If I am, let me know in the comment section down below. You have to remember, I read this stuff. There was no real internet. Like, the internet was for rich people when I was a kid. Okay? But he was the one who really brought the Dark Trooper to life. Okay? It was his brainchild. Now, most people know the Dark Trooper as this robotic entity that went down, kidnapped the cute Baby Yoda / Grogu, and went back. And Din Djarin had to fight tooth and nail to defeat one. And against such odds, who could win but Luke Skywalker? Okay? Which was an awesome... I geeked out. My wife giggled at me the whole time. Because I was arguing within myself if that was really Luke Skywalker or not. But the Dark Trooper, I like that they kept the sinister nature of what the Dark Trooper is. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay? As I said before these entities kidnapped Baby Yoda, they were the brainchild of this General Rom Mock. Okay? The general was... Unlike most of the Imperial generals, he was an advocate for martial combat. He didn't want, superstar destroyers and the Death Star and all this other stuff. He didn't see any honor in it. It was aboard his ship, the Arc Hammer, that at least in Legends, because what do we say on this channel? Legends are always better, that our story begins. Now, similar technologies to the exoskeleton, or Phase Zero exoskeleton, was actually used with Darth Vader's suit. So the ability to wear an armored suit, to have it heavily armored, to have it used out of a particular material, to have it be super durable. It was more than just your normal stormtrooper armor, okay? These special cybernetic augments were first used on clone troopers, because they weren't going to use them on regular people and then have it, get all messed up. So they used it on the remaining clone troopers. Now, these special augmented cybernetic troopers saw battle just before the Battle of Yavin. It wasn't until years later that the new phase of Dark Trooper really emerged. And that's when we're introduced to them in the Dark Forces video game. These new Dark Troopers were a better breed of killer. Okay, they weren't just mindless clones that were augmented cybernetically. They had advanced battle training, specifically with weapons, and their specialized armor that was dark gray and looked sinister. Like, you knew these were not your run-of-the-mill stormtroopers. Even though stormtroopers come in various shapes and sizes, their armor's different based on where they're at, none of them looked the way the Dark Trooper did. Their armor was specifically what made them so dangerous, because it was nigh on indestructible. Even lightsabers had a hard time cutting through it. It was almost like the Mandalorian armor. Although Kyle Katarn, who was the main character in Dark Forces, succeeded in destroying the ship, the Arc Hammer, some of these troopers survived. Some of them were even kept to guard Vader's palace on Vajun. Now, post the fall of the Empire, post Palpatine's death and the second Death Star exploding, a warlord reintroduced the Dark Trooper. In fact, he brought it one step further, which is where we're entered into The Mandalorian. You had Moff Gideon saw the use of mortal soldiers as weakness, because you can have the best armor in the world. You can have the best training money can buy. You can have the best weapons. But if the person in the armor, the man, the soldier, if that wears down because of fatigue, if that wears down because of mental illness or, whatever the case may be, the armor's useless without the person in it. So that's why the Doctor in The Mandalorian said they were finally perfected. Because, we even saw a scene where they were sucked out of the docking stations they were in, and then they came right back into the ship. Like, a human couldn't do that, or a mortal couldn't do that. Even with the best, equipment money can buy, being out in space would hurt them. So the troops became fully robotic. And it was these changes that made them truly deadly. It was their ability to sense what is the biggest threat to them. Now, there's speculation, although there's never been any proof, that part of the M count, or the tissue or DNA sample that they took from Baby Yoda was used in the building of these Dark Troopers so that they can detect what's a Jedi and what's not a Jedi. Because at this time period, Moff Gideon knew, all the Moffs knew about what Darth Vader really was. They knew he was a Sith. They knew Palpatine was a Sith because they now had full access to all of the Imperial records. So how do you feel about the Dark Trooper? Do you like it? Which is more terrifying? The mortal in the, combat suit? Or the robotic version of it? Did you know about the Dark Troopers before they kidnapped Grogu? Let me know in the comments section down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. My name is Daniel. I am an old Star Wars fan, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one.